Hey guys, welcome back to another edition. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you. If you've never liked, subscribed, or follow our channel before, make sure you do so now so that way you can get the latest content as we upload it to YouTube. Now, today I'm going to talk about business pro tips, and I'm going to stick to a format that allows you and I to be able to engage and get the most of the content up front so that you're not stuck here for 30 minutes or more. With that being said, today is all about taking a learning opportunity a little different way. If you're in a relationship, you have a partner, you have a wife, you have a husband, you have a girlfriend, you have a boyfriend, this episode is going to be for you because it's going to allow you to learn from interacting with them. Even though it may seem like chastisement, you need to understand that they have your best interests at heart. There are going to be times, due to mistakes that we make in business and we make certain statements, that our mates can see our businesses or our activity of growing a company as competition for attention. Well, today on the show, I'm going to help you guys realize how you can keep that from happening by starting off with business pro tip number one. Listen to your mate, listen to them. Whether your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife, your partner, listen to them. Now, one of the hardest things to do is when you're trying to grow a business is you don't have a set schedule. And because you don't have a set schedule, you make promises that a person who does have a set schedule or come from a background of having a set schedule cannot stand. I have made this mistake myself. I have stuck my peppermint socks in my foot and sucked on my toes on many occasions because it's really, as we understand it when you start a company, it's understood. If you are in a relationship, there are certain things that you have to do. The best examples that I can give you is do your business part time. You have your full time job, and as you transition into doing your business full time, that you keep a set schedule. What ends up happening a lot in throughout business is that we talk to our mates and they team. For us, it seems like they're venting at us. When in reality, they're actually not venting. They're explaining the inconsistency in the way that we're functioning. Especially for me, when I got married, I was already in business, and at the time, the business that I was doing, I had a set schedule. At the same time, I was operating a business, and that schedule was all day. This is part of the mindset. But out of all day, there was very little activity being done after a certain time. She knew it. I knew it. My kids knew it. Now, this is important because as time went on, what ends up happening is they begin to tell more and more and more the truth. And if you're not careful, you become more and more denying truth. It's important that when you are doing business to remember there's actually time to be working in the business and then on the business. But whatever you do, you must begin to at a certain point set a schedule. And you got to get very proficient as being the time that you are working, that you're working. Number two pro tip. This is going to be important as well. Don't go to the office to socialize. Only go to drive the numbers. This is a mistake that I made early on because what ends up happening is that when you're working on another job, you're drawing into income. So when you're working, socialization is part of the skills. You take a moment to go speak to someone. You talk about what it is that you may be doing. I'll case in point to kind of give a hard example out there. It may be a recent movie you may be thinking about, or it may be an opportunity for an activity that you just did on vacation or something. You want to share that information with either your other partner or some of your staff that worked for you, or maybe even somebody who's a vendor of yours. And you'll find out that you took an hour out of the day, or maybe 2 hours out of the day, and you haven't accomplished nothing that will drive revenue. I mean, completely nothing. I cannot tell you those mistakes from early on and in time throughout the course, even up to now, I have to ask myself out of every interaction, did I just take an hour away to socialize? Was I training? And if I was training, was the training something? Because sometimes we call training conversations, and it's really not training. These are not activities we're asking people to immediately implement into their personal life and utilize to drive income. It is a conversation that we're having, that we're teaching, but it doesn't drive revenue. And you have to stay out of those moments, especially when you're an entrepreneur, you're an officer, you're an executive, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to drive the numbers so that you can lead. Now, that's going to be important. Remember, don't go to your office to socialize, go to your office to drive numbers, especially when you are the person at the top. There is nothing worse than the person at the top being distracted at any given time for socialization. Have I made that mistake before? The answer is yes. Can I continue to make those mistakes as I mature in business? The answer is no. It means that it has to be by design and on purpose, and it has to be good. It has to be by design, on purpose, it has to be good. Similar to the way that anything that we do has to have an outcome that is good. It can't have an outcome that actually delays good. Pro tip number three. Pro tip number three is you have to learn how to pull out wisdom from every interaction. And also, when you're talking to vendors, if you're talking to family members or friends, every interaction, you got to learn how to pull out wisdom. Think about a big well, and in that well is deep. Well, in order to pull out wisdom means you front one is going to be physical. Being that today we just turn on faucets, we don't have to wind up and pull that bucket and take that water that's out that well and then pour it into another bucket, then place that bucket of water. Today in society, people still have to draw from wells. Here's the other aspect of it, though. When you're coming into a pro tip and you're operating in business, you have to be able to draw from each interaction as if you're drawing out water, and it is the source of the lifeblood of your business. As an entrepreneur, an executive officer, or even a staff member, or maybe a manager that's working with one, let me just tell you, you will find out more often than not that you're not going to always have all the answers. Because we don't have all the answers, and one thing about males, and I'm not going to say that all males do this, but I can tell you the group of males that I have associated with and myself, we can get into a car and we can be lost and we're not going to tell you. We can get into business and we can be traveling in a direction and we're getting feedback and we don't tell you. Let me tell you, that's not something you need to do. I made that mistake. You probably made that mistake as well. You continue to go, and there's a great video underneath fundamentals on our regular. So if you go to our playlist, underneath the playlist, we got fundamentals. One of the great videos we talked about is when you realize you're going in the wrong way and you're on a train, do you get off the train and then go back? Or do you keep riding the train? Well, in business, one of the pro tips is, especially number three, is you can't continue riding the train. You have to be able to draw out wisdom. There's nothing wrong with asking the vendor, especially if you have trucks that come to your place. I mean, some of us have products and services. Other ones don't. We don't have trucks. We may have Amazon or we have UPS dropping off a package. That's something that we order. But if you have trucks and you have vendors that's delivering to other places, they can actually give you some great insight. So versus socializing, ask questions that are for dialogue, but the overall reason is to expand to what you know, because there's nothing worse than being a business owner and not having somebody around you that you can draw from. The challenge is when they do talk, you have to fight through this, especially when you're trying to gain skills. What the difference between sarcasm, chastisement, and reactionary feelings. Now I'm gonna tell you what again. You gotta learn the difference between somebody being sarcastic, chastisement, and the emotion what makes you reactionary, because those three things are very different. Chastisement is correction, putting you in the right direction. These people are not quitting on you. If somebody's going to chastise me about something I didn't do, and they say it in a way that gets me emotional, I have to drop that emotion. I have to take that chastisement and saying they're telling me it's for the best interest of a whole, not just my interaction with them, but also my interaction with myself and what my business is. I have to take that and say, okay, how come? Because the reason that we have to take everything from an aspect of learning how to draw out of it is because we need to draw out. We have to learn through observation. We can't always be so personal that if anybody say anything, we just now I'm going to say this because I've said it before, and I've also learned the lesson of not saying this a lot. Don't tell someone who is telling you the truth about yourself, and you know it because it hits you right in the center of your thought process. There's an old school statement about a spanking always make a person. I mean, now, if you've never been spanked before, this may not be for you, but I did get spanked as a child. It didn't kill me, but I can tell you, when I knew I was going to get spanked, I knew what I did was totally wrong. But when I got that spanking, I was preparing for it. And because I was preparing for it, I did like most kids do. You kind of pack your pants. But my parents were smart. They would say, you got to strip down to your underwears. They were going to make sure, because once our older sibling packed the pants and the word got out that packing the pants was the thing to do, or wearing sweatpants with 3 or 4 shorts underneath it, it was no way my parents going to let us keep our pants on. But I thank my parents for this day, because what they taught me was when the world spank you, they don't love you. But when we spank you, you only go as far as to your bedroom or the timeout. But no matter what, you get to come out and we don't break fellowship. The world takes the fellowship away. So how does that play out a role when pro tip number 3? Because chastisement is always correction. So what you should do if someone is telling you something, you first have to ask if they say something sarcastic and you feel it attacks your intellect. Ask them this question: how can I implement what you just said? Or should I only feel what you just said? And if I respond negatively, will you be willing to tell me again in another way so I can actually implement it and make myself wiser and smarter? Now, that may sound like a lot, but here's the thing. Most people who are going to be sarcastic are not willing to tell you actually how to implement what they just said. It's just a challenge of your intellect. And if it's a challenge of your intellect, you can't take it personal. They just expose where their experience ends and their frustration begins because they don't have anything else they can teach you. They just as lost as you are. You made a decision, and that decision that you made offended them. The best thing they can do is says, I really don't know how to react with this, but I got to get back at you. So I'm going to say something sarcastic because I got nothing else I can offer. Well, once we get past that point, we realize it was just sarcastic. The next thing you need to figure out is that chastisement means it's directional. I remember when I didn't know how to change a tire. What I thought was a sarcastic statement was really chastisement because my dad was telling me, go get the jack out of the back of the car and I'm going to show you. What I heard is, don't you know it's a jack in the back of the car? Because I only heard about, did I know it was a jack? I felt it was an attack at my intelligence. And the honest truth was, I was 15 years old. I just got my learner's permit. I didn't even know it was a jack in the back of the car. So my reaction was emotional. Let me just explain something to you. Our emotions are an indicator of areas we have less to grasp. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, your emotions have to be the third thing on the totem pole. And once you feel it, it's just letting you know, I don't have these skills. That's all. Let that be a motor operandi to get you empowered to actually do better and learn the skill. Now I'm going to tell you, that's going to, some people may come across after you begin to, every time your emotions are provoked and you begin to realize your emotions are provoked and you immediately go into learning mode and you immediately go into application mode and taking what this person says and asking them to walk you through it. A person who really wants you to be successful, even if they're upset because you wasn't consistent, you begin to violate what they were saying before. If they're chastising you, they're going to walk you through. How many times, and I'm a parent, how many times have we chastised our kids about doing something and then we immediately stood there and we telling them from the center of our thought process how we feel that they did not respect the fact that we had already told them what to do, and we begin to do it with them as we're showing them as we're talking. Now, remember, for us, we got through that moment, we gain a skill. But when you're an entrepreneur and someone's talking to you and your whole identity is wrapped in the business versus the business being a source of leverage for your identity as being a husband. And that's the part of what I say chastisement is, because once you make your business your identity, you can't handle someone telling you, listen, you are very good in this area, but you're bad in that area. That's because you projected yourself out. And that business is one of the ways that you have gained confidence. But it should be one of the things that you leverage. Notice what I said, leverage, which means I'm leveraging with this product or service in order to drive revenue to my home. Think about this regards. If you get a job, you leverage the job to buy things outside of work. Most of us don't go to work because we owe our company a debt. We go to work because we owe the creditors the money. So if you're in a job right now and you're going to work, it's because you have creditors that's outside your job. Well, when it comes to being an entrepreneur, an officer, an executive, and even if you're self-employed, be around people. If you're the only person in your company and you started this and you are the head, you're at the head, you have to be around people who can actually tell you that you have to make improvements. How do you deal with sailing through the storms and then sailing through calm seas unless you have people around you who point to you and tell you that this is not right? One of the biggest blessings is when you have a family that you have to provide for, every decision counts. It really does. It was, I mean, if you've never, if you're not married right now, then I would tell you, ask somebody who's married that works a job. And if they make a decision that catapults their family into catastrophicness, and I noticed that's, I mean, being catastrophic, I said catastrophicness, that's not really a word, but catastrophic situation that causes similar situations to large arguments in the middle of the night, like how come you didn't tell me you made this decision? And it adversely affects the family. And pro tip number 3, the to make sure you understand this is that we must always learn as a leader and understand that if somebody tells us something sarcastic, can we differentiate that from someone actually giving chastisement? Remember, chastising means correction. Sarcasm is almost similar to punishment. And punishment, what I mean is that I'm not going to give you a skill that's resourceful that you can implement. I'm just going to punish you because you aggravated me. And I don't have the skills to go past this point. And I've always said that I was blessed because I've been around partners that were terrified to tell me the truth. But I also had a wife that I had to sleep beside who was not. I mean, if you talking about somebody who can just straight beat up your ego, I was blessed to marry that type of person because it was nothing that she wasn't willing to say if she saw it attacking the family. Some of the best conversations happened because I was married. Now, when I was single, people kind of told me what I wanted to hear when I was operating in business. But once I got married, I was told what I needed to hear. I was told things that I tried to discount. And I look back over those times and I look at the woman that I'm still with today, and I can say, she stayed with me knowing I was discounting what she was telling me. And I'm going to tell you, if you're an entrepreneur, an officer, an executive, or you're the only person to run your business, one of your greatest advocates is someone who is going to give you chastisement, but they're not going anywhere. Don't make the mistake where you end up being chastised and thinking it's sarcasm, because sometimes it can be very close to that yellow line. You know, that line that when you cross over the traffic and it's only two lanes, you blow because as you coming towards them and they coming towards you like this, it's kind of scary because they done drifted over. So you got to lay on the horn and the people behind you think you're blowing at, you may be blowing at someone else, but you're really blowing at that car that's oncoming to you. A lot of times our mates are telling us, our partners, our husbands, our wives, our girlfriends. Now, I'm not referring to at all competing. There's a fine line. And sometimes you got to ask, do you feel what I'm doing for a living is competing for your attention? If you don't ask that question, sometimes they may be honest and says, yes, I do feel like I'm competing with the business. What that's happening is inconsistent time. I just want you to know, even Fortune 500 companies, they do have times, and you've heard the story. There is no type of hours frames when you're trying to get a company up and running. It's like when you have a baby, you can be all times, but you do have to have some form of consistency. And the reason that most of the people you interact with, they get very frustrated is because of not being consistent. If you're going to work from 10 to 10, that's 12 hours, because you can work regular jobs that way. If you're going to work 12 to 12, that's consistent. But what you got to be consistent is the time that you set aside for them, when you're going to be home for dinner, when you're going to pick them up and eat lunch together. If you can't eat lunch, pick them up to dinner, when you're going to go for a walk, if you can't go on a date because you're pouring all your money into your business. Just keep that consistent. If you do not keep that consistent, the person who's actually helping you, and this is the part which I had to learn in business and that's the reason I'm giving you these facts today. The person who's actually cares about you, we don't listen to. Everyone else who's telling us what we want to hear, we do. They the most dangerous one to listen to. So think about these pro tips. It'll be in the body. If it's not in the body, it will be there. And I just want you to think about today. One, listen to your wife, your husband, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and your partner. Listen to them. Just understand that. Listen. Number two, don't go to the office or go anywhere for socialization. Go to drive revenue. When you're there, it must be correlated to generating income. Because remember, like if you have a regular job, you go to work and they already have the income sitting in the bank. But if you're running your company, the money that's sitting in the bank is money that's already set aside for bills. It's already set aside. So you're talking about new money. And you can't go to the office and socialize and you're not driving new money. And number three, you got to know the difference between someone being sarcastic. And it's okay, because if someone's sarcastic, what you should always do, and pro tip number three, do this. Just keep in mind, if a person's being sarcastic to you, they have gotten frustrated because they probably already had told you and it was really chastisement, but you haven't listened. So what's happening is the only thing they have left without cussing you out is to be sarcastic. And if they do, smile and say, I apologize. I apologize because I don't push you to the limits where all you can be is sarcastic, because you already gave me truth and I ignored it. Let's not push our business partners, our husbands, our wife any further. Let this be the day that we begin to see sarcasm. Now, some people can be sarcastic, not your mate, but we're talking about people who are you in a divine relation, a union. You're in a union with them. If you got a business partner, you got another partner, you're in a union, which means you are committed to the ideology of what you're doing. And if you are, know the difference between sarcasm, where they have been exhausted because they're not listening, and you accept it as, okay, true sarcasm, they're not going to help you. Chastisement, they'll get right in there and they'll help you. Or they'll tell you what you're supposed to do, and all you got to do is follow the blueprint of their verbal, written communication. And then third, pull out the wisdom. Every interaction, good or bad, when you're traveling as an entrepreneur, will lead you to either calm seas or bad weather. But here's the thing. Look at calm seas as bad weather, and then look at rough seas as learning opportunities, because you must always be prepared. Because what ends up happening when you're an entrepreneur for long, you would actually get complacent. And when something like what we're in right now, where they keep saying in the marketplace that, oh, we had a soft landing. Oh, wait a minute, we don't know if we had a recession. When you constantly get information, nothing's changed since the restart of COVID, and they continue to raise interest rates. Nothing's changed, guys. So that meant that we're still in bad weather. According to recent information that was put out, these 3 pro tips will help you. So that way, if you're in a situation right now and you start feeling like your mate, you're in this by yourself, they don't support you, please go back to these pro tips and say to yourself, remember this, they still living in the house with you. Now, if you come home and all their stuff packed up and they're gone, these pro tips ain't going to help you. You done burnt that bridge. But if they're still there, that is a union. And yes, they have the right to be frustrated, because inconsistency, even we get upset about. If our employees don't show up, we get mad. So what happens when we don't show up with our loved ones? They don't have the right to get mad? Let's not be so self-absorbed with our businesses that we forget that we must show up like we ask everyone else. And until next Monday, and I give out more pro tips, love the unities you have and don't destroy them when you don't know what you're doing. You guys have an amazing, wonderful day.